We're really excited to have three of our past chairs joining us tonight. We have one other chair who's out of the country right now, Charles Knuckles, who's not able to join us. We've not been successful connecting with him in his remote location. I imagine he's up in the India or Pakistan or somewhere doing some of his anthropological research. But we're so delighted to have three of our past chairs, including one of our original chairs, Ty Markham. So we'll go ahead and get started. Just a couple of brief announcements. If for those of you that aren't aware, February 9th of 2013 was the 10-year, the launch of MESA, the Mormon Environmental Stewardship Alliance. We had a little commemorative event a couple of evenings ago on Thursday evening at Mestizo in Salt Lake City in their little community art gallery room where it all started, and it was really fun seeing so many there. Tonight's a commemorative fireside to hear from some of our past and current leaders of MESA about the past, the present, and the future of this organization. And this is kind of fun to reflect on where we've been and also think about the importance and the value of this movement going forward. So with that, why don't we start, Abigail, with an opening prayer. Thank you, and then I'll introduce our three speakers briefly before we launch into it.
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this day, and thank you for the time that we get to spend together worshiping today on this beautiful Sabbath. And thank you for the moisture in the water we've gotten in the West this season. And bless that we can take away these thoughts and prayers and put them into our hearts, and bless that we can lead out on stewardship throughout the world, especially where we live, and respect thy call to be good stewards. And I say these things in the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Abigail. A couple of quick announcements. We don't yet have another fireside scheduled, although we're exploring some possibilities. Some of you may be aware that about 2 weeks from, actually 2 weeks from tomorrow, is the 190th anniversary of the revelation of the Word of Wisdom, Section 89 in the Doctrine and Covenants. And we're exploring some possible speakers. So stay tuned for that. We may very well have a fireside in March, kind of commemorating that significant law of health and stewardship. We will also, MESA will have a presence at the Wallace Stegner Symposium in Salt Lake City on the 16th and 17th of March. We understand that Utah's Governor Spencer Cox and Speaker Brad Wilson from the House of Representatives in the Utah Legislature will be two keynotes. We also just learned that Bishop Christopher Waddell from the presiding bishopric of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints will also be speaking at the Stegner Symposium. And so it's exciting. The focus of the symposium this year is on the Great Salt Lake and watershed, water resource issues in the West. And so we're hopeful that we'll hear some really valuable and timely messages about stewardship of our Great Salt Lake here in the West. So watch for more information. We'll share information through MESA's social media and newsletters and other ways of outreach. But if any of you are inclined, I think tickets may still be available for the event if you're able and would like to participate in that. But we are planning to have a MESA booth there. We've been invited to participate. And so look for more information about that coming up. So I want to just briefly introduce our three speakers. We'll hear first from Ty Markham. Ty was a founding co-chair of the Mormon Environmental Stewardship back in 2013. She spent much of her professional career in education. She's a psychologist by training and has a doctor of psychology, and has just been an incredible and inspirational person to lead and launch this movement. And we're so grateful to hear from her. She currently resides in Torrey, Utah, where she runs a bed and breakfast and also has a sustainable living center there, which she may reference in her remarks. So we're grateful to have you with us, Ty. Next, we'll hear from Marc Coles-Ritchie. Marc is a scientist who works for the Grand Canyon Trust. He chaired MESA about 4 years ago, as I recall. He is just really passionate about public lands and gets to spend a lot of his time helping to advocate for public lands in the Four Corners region, in the Colorado River Plateau and watershed area, and just brings a wealth of knowledge as a scientist working day to day in that area. And then Rachael Lauritzen, who is our current MESA chair, we're delighted to have her leadership over the last couple of years. She is an educator and works in textiles and art, and is just an incredible resource. She's been such a change maker in her own community. She resides in South Salt Lake. I should have mentioned Mark lives in Salt Lake City. Rachael lives in South Salt Lake, and we love highlighting the work that she did several years ago when she was just a citizen, like many of us are, who lobbied her government to create a recycling program in her community, which was formed, and she continues to be a champion of so many great things that are going on in the Salt Lake Valley. So we're really grateful to hear from these three leaders. And with that, I will turn the time over, Ty, to you to get us kicked off.
Thank you, Soren. Well, it's been a fun journey with many emotions besides joy. There's been frustration and tears, and mostly joy and laughter, and just enjoying working with our colleagues together and fighting the good fight. And when I say colleagues, I'm including our allies in the quest for preservation of our beautiful planet and environment. So we've worked with right from the very beginning with other wonderful groups such as United Physicians for a Healthy Environment, UPHE, and all kinds of clean air groups. There's too many to mention, but we've worked side by side with them at rally to promote rallies and sometimes protests and do other activist things that we have been able to accomplish over the years. But I had the fortune of being present right at the beginning when we were sort of branching off of the LDS Earth Stewardship, which is our sister. We call it our sister organization because that's kind of where we started from in the beginning. They wanted to focus mostly just on the education and personal responsibility for our own lives and being good stewards without getting involved in any particular campaign to reach out, to do outreach to political figures. And a lot of us felt like that was so essential in moving forward this important work to raise awareness, especially among the LDS community, that there are many, many things that we can do to be good stewards of the earth, and more than just recycling, and more than just the wonderful things that we try to do ourselves. When we reach out publicly and join other allies that are working hard, and let our fellow LDS Latter-day Saint members know that they're not alone in feeling the concerns that we all do feel about our air quality, our water quality, the health of our of other species, all of creation, that we are charged in the scriptures, and we know from our faith, to be good stewards over. And we wanted to advance activism in the kindest and most positive way we could, and show the world that LDS people do care and are willing to speak up and write letters and show up and do citizen lobbying at the Capitol, whatever it might be. So that's what drew me in. It was the the idea that I'm not just going to be recycling or riding my bike. I'm going to be able to do more in this new organization. So that's why we call it an alliance, because we work together oftentimes with other groups in sponsoring things, events, and showing up for these important rallies and writing letter writing campaigns, lobbying campaigns, etc. Soren, do you want to start some of those slides?
Yes, happy to. Give me just a minute.
And that will be kind of nice, and it'll remind me of some of the things we started out in 2013. That's just one of our early photos, just to reflect that we're stewards, and the health of our earthly home is really in our hands as human beings. Adam was charged to protect and nurture all of the animals in the garden and all of the creatures, all of the creations, and to be a good steward. And that challenge goes out to all of us to maintain the integrity of our ecosystems and keep our planet healthy. It's our only home. And and we're all interconnected. So that little picture shows it. Why don't you just, this was one of the first events that we were partly sponsors of, along with Moms for Clean Air. Utah Moms for Clean Air was led by Charisse Udell, and her husband Kent was on our board for many, many years and still is. So this really exciting that we got to work together with that group in the beginning in addressing the problems of air quality along the Wasatch Front. So we can go to see a few more slides of that event. This is our banner as we were walking up State Street toward the Capitol, where we had this huge event, and many of our early members and followers were there with their families. So it was a huge, as you can see, the crowd. It was probably, at least at that point in time in 2014, early 2014, I think it was maybe February. So it was kind of chilly, but it was an amazing Saturday. There I am at this is MESA now, at the microphone leading the song that MESA was charged with leading the crowd to sing, as before many of our speakers began to speak, and we sang this wonderful song about protecting the environment. This is Charles Knuckles, our early chair and founder of MESA at the beginning. He's holding up that sign along with Will Markham, my son, and that was one little section of the crowd. And anyway, so you'll see that. This is also Charles holding up a handmade sign, Mormon Environment. Before we had our banner, we were just making our own little signs, and that was part of one of our rallies. I'm pretty sure this might be also the Clean Air Rally, but you can see the crowd was massive. There were close to, I believe, between 8,000 and 10,000 people that showed up. And at the time, it was the largest rally ever recorded on a single event in Utah. So we were very proud to have that many people showing concern about the problems. And luckily that day it was a fairly good clean air day. We didn't have an inversion, so we were lucky to have that beautiful blue sky on that day. But so many of our Saturdays were socked in with, the inversion, capping in the pollution, and making it very difficult for people to be able to be outside or ride their bikes or just have any activities outside without challenging their own health. And so this was just a massive event, and we were proud to be able to participate and co-sponsor some of that initial getting the word out on social media, which we worked very hard to do right off the bat in late 2013 and early 2014 before this rally. It was a lot of fun. This is more from that particular rally where you see clean air posters. And you can go ahead and, yeah, we'll just go through these pretty quickly. At least there were a lot of pictures. This is another smaller rally at the Capitol, the state Capitol, where it was sponsored by Wildlands Protection. Now I can't remember the name exactly. And MESA co-sponsored this along with Wild Utah Project. That's what it was. And we were concerned about the policies that protect the wildlife in Utah. And that was just, my face was oftentimes the prominent face in the early days, because I had already retired my position at the University of Utah as a clinical psychologist. And I had the flexibility to go to these rallies in the daytime that were held, in the middle of the week. Like this one, for instance, I believe was held on a Thursday. So the crowds were smaller because, people have work hours and they can't really go out at noon for a rally when they have to travel pretty far to get there, and they have a brief lunch hour. So you'll see, sometimes you'll notice in these pictures, I would be the one to speak on behalf of MESA for these important issues, environmental and air quality issues, et cetera. So this one again was saving, I think it was saving the Lobo in Utah, the Lobo wolf in the state of Utah. There were issues about that we were trying to support the free range of these precious parts of our animal ecosystem in Utah. And the next slide. Oh, and this is some of the photos that we posted on our website and on our social media. This is a beautiful quote from Joseph F. Smith, our prophet. Love of nature is akin to the love of God. The two are inseparable. That's such a beautiful, this was celebrating Gold Butte National Monument in Nevada. I believe it was in 2017 that we had the opportunity to help expand MESA into Nevada, because they were dealing with public lands issues there as well as we were in Utah. And the Gold Butte National Monument was an important one that they wanted to make sure was protected. And so that's why this photo is beautiful. Photo comes from that region. But that was a nice opportunity. It was one of our first opportunities to actually reach out beyond the state of Utah and work with activists in another state. So that was a little bit of a breakthrough for us in 2017. Next one. And this was Save the Grand Staircase. We were concerned about in 2017 also this is where we were working very hard to make sure our monuments were protected, and the Grand Staircase Monument was on the chopping block at the time. You can see the MESA banner there on the left-hand side. And I believe, I think maybe Bart, I can't remember, maybe Stephen. Anyway, we had a couple of our MESA members holding that sign, that banner up for us. And we were very much involved in that effort to save the Grand Staircase from being reduced in size to almost 9, I think it was like 90% they were proposing. It was horrifying. And that turned out to be pretty successful effort but it was part of the difficulty after Bishop's grand bargain failed. I don't know if many of you are aware or remember that effort that went on for a few years, trying to protect certain areas and from drilling, et cetera, and to mark out certain other areas that would be okay for energy exploration. And then when in 2016, when Trump won the election, then things began to degrade very quickly on that scene, and we were very concerned, and along with other groups like the Wild Utah Project and other environmental groups, we got together and had rallies and wrote letters to all of as many political representatives as we could get to, and lobby hard to save our monuments from being chopped up and maybe even divested to the state to be handled by the state of Utah instead of being a federal monument. And that could have been disastrous because they were going to probably be auctioning off a lot of those public lands if that happened. Luckily, we avoided most of that issue in the long run. So it was largely a success. Next one. That's just our sign. This is one of our MESA board members for a short while, Will Markham. He helped Soren with the being a co-treasurer, I believe it was, for a short while, and on our board, and he's helping us hold our signs up. We also had a poster there as well. And that was, again, we were wanting to not allow the transfer of public lands into the state control, because we felt like the state was not going to protect them the way the federal government would protect these public federal lands, and we were greatly opposed to that process. So that's what this rally was about in the rotunda, and there you can see how many people showed up to that rally. We pretty much packed the rotunda, as you can tell. And we were worried about that land grab. And that was, again, another successful, at least temporarily. We're still worried about that in the future. And this one was a rally that we had in the avenues at one of the libraries up there. I forget the name of the library, but it's right up in the avenues above Salt Lake City near the Capitol, where our representative, Chris Stewart, was going to be speaking at that library, and it was considered a town hall. And so we wanted to make sure we got the message to him that we were very concerned about clean air. And that's me holding a couple of signs. That's my daughter and my grandbaby there in that photo. It just says we care about our kids' future. We care about our air. This is an air quality issue. And, you know, we, as a board, we kind of got assignments, on my specialty was the clean air issue. So I basically showed up at all the clean air issue rallies, but we all kind of, you know, took over wherever we could. We were all, everybody that was able to go to a rally was there. This is just a close-up of those two signs. And this was another rally. This one was the divest from fossil fuels. This is the University of Utah. Where's, what's it called? President's Circle. And we were there. You can see our sign in the center, sort of toward the back, being held up by me and Hans. Hans was one of our not the board member, but he was on our board of advisory board, and he's very special. I wish he were enjoying this right now with us, because he had quite a big input for us in the beginning. He was a professor of economics. I'm pretty sure he's been retired at this point, but while he was on our advisory board, he was still a full professor of economics and very concerned about the economic, the economies of ecology, of the ecological impacts of what our capitalistic, I guess you might say, was doing to the environment. There was just sort of this kind of weaponized capitalism toward the earth, and we wanted to make sure that we could at least communicate with those large Utah corporate and educational institutions that it was important to divest their investments from the fossil fuel industries and start moving us toward a clean energy future. And so that was the kind of the beginnings of that movement back in this might be 2015, I'm guessing, maybe 2016, somewhere in that range. And again, there's our Will holding up the sign. And I remember taking that photo. So I was there too, of course, but I was taking the picture. And the next one is, I think this might be the Stericycle. I'm not sure. This one could be the Stericycle or the Chevron rally. No, I think this is not Stericycle. I can't remember which one. But we were reaching out to Governor Herbert. I believe this is the one that took place in front of the governor's mansion. And I think this had to do with, I can't remember. Soren, do you have any ideas? I've lost track of this one.
I don't remember this one. No, I'm sorry, I'm not much help.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. Let's see now. I'll have to go back. It may have been
Stericycle. I think you may be right.
Yeah, it might be Stericycle. Anyway, I just remember we were very concerned about the burning, of the those incinerators being built being present so close to schools and neighborhoods that were greatly affected by the pollution, which was quite dangerous and toxic. And it was quite a storm, and it was wonderful because not wonderful. It was a tough battle. But what was wonderful was that we were able to get Aaron Brockovich to show up for one of our rallies and be a speaker. And we made national news. And that effort brought us really closer to many of our allies, in which one of them was an LDS mom named Alicia Connell. For a while, she was on our board of MESA. She spearheaded this concern because it was a neighborhood effort. She was a realtor in that neighborhood and lived in that neighborhood. And so many families were being affected by the toxic pollutants that were being pushed out by these incinerators. There were incinerators of toxic materials and chemicals from healthcare industry and other industries, and they weren't following the guidelines and regulatory requirements to protect the environment from their pollution. And so we had to make sure that we got this message to Governor Herbert and to the legislature. And they ended up moving the Stericycle plant, incinerator plant, to a different location, I guess far away, or at least they tried to. I'm not sure they were successful, but they did move it out of that area. They eventually closed that one down. That was in North Salt Lake City near so many neighborhoods and schools. And I think they tried to figure a way to get out there in Tooele area where they were not close to development. Not sure what came of that. I kind of lost track of it. But this was our fight to get that word out. And to next one. I think that's might be
the end of them.
All right. Well, we covered some early ground. That was between the years of 2013 and about 2018-ish and 2017, when we were worried about our public lands and doing a lot of clean air fairs and those sorts of things. I don't have pictures of all the many fairs, but those are the most fun things I did because manning those tables, you get to meet and talk to individuals face to face. And that was such an enjoyable outreach besides social media, where, you know, it's more anonymous. You don't get to know the person. You just get to post things. But that's where we really signed up a lot of our members through those fairs, clean air fairs, and other environmental opportunities that were fun. And so that's my story, and I'm sticking with it.
My next. So happy to be here tonight. I'm Marc Coles-Ritchie. I was the chair of MESA from about 2019 to 2021. I organized my thoughts. I don't have a PowerPoint, but I organized my thoughts. Hold on, let me start my timer so I don't go too long. About how I came to the environmental movement and MESA in particular, and what we accomplished when I was board chair. And then I thought I'd end with both my frustrations and my hopes for the current state of our movement towards conservation. And I apologize, my voice is getting over a cold a little bit. But when I was young, camping was an important thing in our family, hiking, visiting national parks, and going on Boy Scout trips. And that really instilled in me a love of nature. And as I grew older and saw issues that were affecting our environment, and water contamination and air pollution and habitat destruction, when I was young, I worked for Greenpeace. I had been a missionary, and then a little bit after that, I was a missionary for Greenpeace. In both cases, I was knocking on doors and asking people to support a cause that I thought was really important. And in both cases, got a fair bit of rejection, but felt good about what I did. Then I went on to study environmental studies and ecology, and worked in advocacy and in science and monitoring for the Forest Service for a number of years. And then, as Soren mentioned, I currently work for Grand Canyon Trust, advocating for conservation of public lands. In my case, my assigned area is Southern Utah. So a lot of those things brought me to MESA because I had a passion for conservation, passion for protecting the environment, and my belief in the gospel message compelled me to share my concerns and to try to do what I could to be a good steward of the earth and encourage others to do better at protecting our air and water and ecosystems. Also, my concern for environmental justice, or injustice is probably another way to say it. So much of the environmental problems that we have in our world affect poor people and people without resources. And so that's environmental injustice that we need to address. And as Christians and followers of Jesus, we are our brother's keeper, and we need to do whatever we do to the least of the society, we're doing to him. So that compelled me to be more engaged, using both my faith and my scientific understanding to promote conservation. I was also concerned about the apathy that I saw among so many Latter-day Saints, and it was disappointing and frustrating to me. So I wanted to be a voice, an LDS voice for conservation and environmental protection. One way that I explain it to people who are frustrated with the LDS lack of conservation and environmental mindset is, I think of the pioneers when they first arrived in this region in Utah and in the Western United States. Life was a real struggle for them. They really had to work hard and fight against nature to survive. whether it was the cold of the winter or needing to get water for their crops or cut down trees or hunt animals. So in the early days, nature was kind of a foe, something they had to conquer. And I think that mentality persists for a lot of people in our community and in our culture. But I think it's changing, and it's exciting to me that we're realizing that nature is something that we don't need to conquer anymore. It's something that we can appreciate and enjoy and experience as a majesty, as a wonderful thing. Just like Jesus went into nature to pray and Joseph Smith went into the grove of the forest to pray, we can all seek solitude and peace and spirituality in nature. And there's some beautiful scriptures that talk about that, like D&C 59, a favorite of mine. It says, "Verily I say that inasmuch as ye do this, the fullness of the earth is yours, the beasts of the field and the fowls of the air, and that which climbeth," let me make my screen bigger, sorry. "Climbeth upon the trees and walketh upon the earth, yea, and the herb and the good things which come of the earth, whether for food or for raiment, or for houses or for barns, or for orchards or for gardens, or for vineyards, yea, all things which come of the earth in the season thereof are made for the benefit and the use of man, both to please the eye and to gladden the heart, yea, for food and for raiment, for taste and for smell, to strengthen the body and to enliven the soul. And it pleaseth God that he hath given all these things unto man, for unto this end were they made to be used, with judgment, not to excess, neither by extortion." So that's one example of scripture and doctrine that compels me to be engaged in stewardship and protecting the earth. And there's many others. I won't read them all now, but you can go to the MESA website to see more scriptures about conservation and stewardship. So what did we accomplish when I was board chair from 2019 to 2021? I just want to mention a few highlights. We had an amazing symposium in 2020 with great speakers. And I remember afterwards, people who had watched that told me that they were so impressed with that symposium. We had a range of scientists and activists and indigenous LDS people and just public citizens and politicians as well. And I was really proud of that event we did. Ty has mentioned a lot of the events that we've been to and had signs at and supported. In addition to the ones Ty mentioned, Sunstone and clean air and clean energy events. And Ty was really good at getting us out to those, and I was happy to continue that legacy. And I remember many of those events, people would say, "I'm so glad that you're here. I'm so glad that MESA is representing the LDS community and speaking up for the environment, for clean air, for conservation." And they would say to me, "Your voice is so important," and I appreciated hearing that. We also have met with a lot of political leaders, and one of our grants was designed to help us try to persuade congressional leaders to be better on environmental issues. And I remember some really productive meetings we had with staffers of US Congress members where we could share concerns and values that we have as Latter-day Saints who care about the environment. Another thing I was really proud of during my board chair time was our connection with other environmental groups who have an LDS component. And there's three in particular that we've collaborated with: the Latter-day Saint Earth Stewardship, Mormon Women for Ethical Government, and the Citizens Climate Lobby LDS Action Team. So those three organizations, along with MESA, have hosted some really meaningful events where we've had speakers and talked about environmental issues from an LDS or a Christian perspective. Ty mentioned our support for Bears Ears and Grand Staircase Escalante National Monuments. That's really something close to my heart, and I've been so pleased that we have been able to write letters and go to rallies and speak about our support for Bears Ears, for the tribes, for co-management by Indigenous people, and conservation of those really beautiful and important landscapes that are cultural landscapes to the Indigenous people who have lived here since time immemorial. lived on those landscapes. One thing that came out of one of those letters was an opportunity for me to be on a talk radio program, the Ron Arquette Show, which was an unusual place for me. It's not my political leanings, but I was able to share the views of MESA and myself about protecting bears' ears in particular, and I was glad to do that. And then overall, I've just been so pleased to associate with really hardworking people on our board and our colleagues in the environmental community, and particularly LDS folks. And I've been proud to represent MESA at many events and to advocate for protecting this beautiful earth that God has created for us and that we are to be stewards of. As I mentioned earlier, I think there's too much apathy among Latter-day Saints and society in general. Change is happening, but it's too slow. But I do have hope, and there's a few things that give me hope. One is the amazing technology that's being developed for clean energy, like solar and wind. It's just exciting to see how that's really developed in recent years. It excites me that ecosystems are so resilient and they can recover when we remove the disturbance factors, the things that are causing problems. I'm hopeful because of people, young people in particular, who are supporting conservation in greater numbers and acting in sustainable and meaningful ways to make our environment better. And finally, I'm hopeful that our church is becoming more aware and concerned about the environment. The Great Salt Lake is a big issue right now. And Elder Cassé, or Bishop Cassé's talk in the last General Conference was so beautiful about environmental stewardship, where, and let me just quote one thing from his talk. He says, "As God's children, we have received the charge to be stewards, caretakers, and guardians of his divine creations. The Lord said he made every man accountable as a steward over earthly blessings, which I have made and prepared for my creatures. Our Heavenly Father allows us to use earthly resources according to our own free will, yet our agency should not be interpreted as license to use or consume the riches of this world without wisdom or restraint." And for me, I shed a tear when that conference talk was given last October. It was something I've been waiting for a long time. And I think it's the beginning of an improved effort by our church and by our culture to better care for creation and the environment. So I'm excited about that. And I'm honored to have been able to talk tonight a little bit about my participation in MESA. And I'm proud to have done what I could to represent MESA and better advocate and protect God's creations. So thank you.
Yes, that means I'm up. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Ty. I have to acknowledge this legacy is something that I did not build, but came to later, and it has been a very good journey for me. One of the things that I have told others is that I don't come naturally to political sorts of things, but I realized along the way, particularly in connection with environmental issues, that if you've ever seen Fiddler on the Roof, the young student activist Perchik tells Hodel that he's like, well, everything's political. He's proposing, but he's like, everything's political. And I realized to my dismay that he was right, actually. And somewhat dismay and somewhat okay, I need to do some work here, because I had seen some needs, and that's what had led to my introduction into political life, which was first proposing to the city along with a petition to start recycling, and then eventually serving on the Planning Commission, which is actually an underappreciated job, I think. I appreciated it because it wasn't elected, it was appointed, and it mostly were pretty quiet meetings. We rarely had agitated people there, occasionally, but it was really, I realized that I was getting involved with the political realm was the way to get the change that we needed on the scale that we needed, working collectively, and particularly at a policy level, on government level, whether it's the local, the state, or the federal level. the only way we can get traction and scale to make the changes that we need to as a society, as a planet, is to work on those things. And I found MESA by Googling. I had been wanting to, I had off and on attended Sunstone, which is sort of a big tent Mormonism, as they like to call it. And they have a lot of important topics there, but I had noticed that there was not very much environmental focus. Some years there was nothing. And I thought, this has got to change. And so I started looking around for people to partner with. And that's how I found MESA. And that was, I think, a really important part of my journey, to realize that there are other Latter-day Saints who are also concerned, and to see that convergence of faith, theology, activism, and personal responsibility that really are all inherent in our faith journeys. And so that was how I came to MESA. And I haven't been chair that long, but I feel like we've had, partly from the momentum of the previous board members and the work that has gone into laying this foundation, we've had some big accomplishments in the time that I've been here. I think one of the highlights for me was last April, when we had Catherine Hayhoe come speak to us. We co-hosted a Fireside event with those other organizations that Mark had mentioned, and she did her homework. She really spoke to the LDS audience with the LDS scriptures, and really it came down to having a lot of conversations. We just need to talk about it. And it reminded me, and I remarked on this at the time, back when I was on my mission, Tempe, Arizona. One of the themes that they were sort of promoting amongst the missionaries was to open your mouth and just kind of, don't worry about, how you think you might be seen, or if you're going to say it just right, just talk about it. Just open your mouth and talk about the gospel in that context. But also, this is part of the gospel, which is talking about the creation that we share and that we rely on. And so that was a big highlight for me. And then, as Mark mentioned, we've collaborated with Mormon Women for Ethical Government and the Citizens Climate Lobby LDS Action Team and the LDS Earth Stewardship. And last year, we more or less formally formed it's not an actual entity, but we call it the Creation Care Coalition, or C3, in the hopes that we can continue to collaborate and coordinate on various efforts. We can amplify some of the efforts that they are doing, and they can amplify ours. And we are still in the process of planning other collaborative efforts. So stay tuned for some of that. We also have been working, just this last year, we were able to receive some grant funding from the Environmental Defense Fund to work on the methane rules and work on raising public awareness, and also legislative support for capping the leaks and reducing the emissions from methane. And the need for that is great, as it is a big amplifier of climate change. We've also been working on the efforts to save the Great Salt Lake, which is drying up, and that has included rallies and some interfaith efforts. We've worked on a number of different things, including podcasts, some op-eds, some editorials, things like that, sometimes from the whole board and sometimes from individuals in our organization, as well as offering workshops, firesides, things like this to help the MESA membership and followers to connect. I do recall after the Catherine Hayhoe Fireside, how there was a woman there, member of the church, very faithful. She'd never been to any of these organizations before. I don't recall how she'd found out about the event, but she told me afterwards she was so happy because she'd finally found her people. And I think there's a lot of this where there are a number of us who are concerned, but sometimes we feel like we're just all on our own and trying to do our own thing. And it feels like throwing little thimblefuls of water at a big raging fire. And when we realize that actually there's a lot of us working on this and we can support each other, that's how we can get a lot of that momentum and support, as well as to grow that movement. And as I was thinking about this, my thoughts tended towards, I I tend to go towards big picture types of ideas. And one of the things that's been on my mind lately is a quote by Thich Nhat Hanh. And he says, we're here to awaken from the illusion of our separateness. And this is something that really resonates strongly with me. And I feel like there's a nice, powerful alignment with what Jesus offers in his intercessory prayer in John. And I thought I would read just a little of that. And he says, he's talking about giving himself as a sacrifice for us to sanctify us through the truth. And he says, he's doing it that they, all of us, may be one, as thou, Father, art in me, and I in thee, that they also may be one in us, that the world may believe that thou hast sent me, and the glory which thou gavest me I have given them, that they may be one, even as we are one. And I think this speaks to our strong doctrine of we are saved in community, essentially. We work together. We have this arrangement with a savior, but we work together, and we include our ancestors and our descendants and our neighbors. And it speaks to this interconnectedness. And I think we sometimes lose sight of that because we have individual agency, and we talk a lot about agency, and for a good reason. But it is really important to remember that interconnectedness. And I was also really struck by Bishop Kaze's talk, and he spoke very specifically how Jesus commanded us to love our neighbors. And he says, and it's not just, the neighbors that we see face to face. He says, from his mouth, the word neighbor does not merely mean geographic proximity. It implies a proximity of the heart. It encompasses all the inhabitants of this planet, whether they live near us or in faraway country, regardless of their origins, personal backgrounds, or circumstances. And I would include in that our non-human neighbors. And Robin Wall Kimmerer is a wonderful writer. She's spoken at length about this. But I think it all interconnects to us. And even though we are given stewardship and in some ways discretion to direct a lot of how resources are used on this earth, that is part of our stewardship, we have to do it with wisdom and moderation. And Mark referenced earlier section 89 of the Doctrine and Covenants. And I just wanted to quote a little bit from that, where the Lord says that all wholesome herbs that God hath ordained for the constitution, nature, and use of man, every herb in the season thereof, and every fruit in the season thereof, and all these to be used with prudence and thanksgiving. Yea, flesh also of the beasts and fowls of the air have been ordained for the use of man for thanksgiving. Nevertheless, they are to be used sparingly. And I think all of this really brings together this idea that we are all interconnected. We have an interconnected being with all of nature, with the plants and the animals that support us, the air that we breathe, the water. I've heard it referred to as interbeing, this interconnectedness. And in some ways it smacks of the law of consecration, where we only take what we need. We only use what we need. And we share and we take responsibility, and we don't overuse to excess. And that is the predicament that we find ourselves in, is that we have this theology, and yet it is so easy to just use more and more because we have tools and other resources that allow us to do that. So that's the theological case. I think what I see for the future of MESA, for our organization, is one of the things that I'm feeling greatly is that there is a sea change happening amongst the members of the church, and more broadly too, where we are making these connections, these theological connections. I have friends and family members who for many years have resisted, and I think because of political affiliations, this idea that we need to do more to take care of the environment, and sort of distancing our integrated state within the environment. But as we have had more and more conversations, and I know just in my personal life, but also within MESA and the larger conversation in the Latter-day Saint communities, these conversations are building to the point that we have had the presiding bishop speak to us about environmental stewardship. And he's not the only one. There's been these references are increasing. And these friends and these family, these members of our ward, more and more people are getting on board. I know in my own ward, my bishop just informed me that we are moving to paper sacrament cups instead of plastic ones. And there are other efforts to maybe go a little further with our wise use of resources. MESA also, we are trying to build more partnerships, more collaborations with people that are already doing other events, other related efforts, whether it's part of our faith or an interfaith thing or other areas of commonality that we have where we can really help to build those networks, those partnerships, and to have a greater effect collectively. We are also planning more action and ways that we can have more discussion of creation care within the ward and stake level, and to support environmental causes generally. One example of this is, I don't know how many of you have heard, but Martin Palmer has started the Fast Forward initiative. And it's a beautiful idea where we fast, and our board and some of our members have decided to do the third Sunday of the month to kind of give you a break from your first Sunday of the month fast, in order to sort of dedicate and consecrate a fast toward environmental causes, and then do the fast offering to an organization that is actively working to address these issues. And it can run the gamut. And so I really see a lot of momentum building both within the organization, within the church as a whole, and seeing these conversations not only increasing, but leading to increased action, meaningful action that will help us to take care of this earth that we've been given so that we may continue to enjoy it, and our children and grandchildren and our neighbors and wherever they may live. So I have really found a lot of inspiration and meaningful work in the work that I have done with MESA and the work that I have seen others do within this organization. So I really appreciate being involved, and I hope that we may continue and build on this momentum. Soren, I think it's back to you.
Well, I want to thank Ty and Mark and Rachel, really inspiring leaders who each have brought their own abilities and insights, their passion to the work that they've done leading MESA over this last decade. There are so many others that have contributed, many board members, legislators, friends and allies and others that have all helped and contributed so much to this movement. We might have time for a couple of questions. I don't know if there's anybody that would like to ask any questions of MESA's leaders while we have them here, past and current leaders. Please feel free to unmute and ask if you've got anything you'd like to ask, or put it in the chat and I'm happy to read it for you.
Kia ora, my name is Piripi Lambert. I'm from New Zealand. I'm a member of the church, was born into the church, and indigenous to this country. What I wanted to ask is, how is the indigenous voice, how is that tracking in terms of being heard, being promoted, within this amazing Opu, this amazing group of wonderful Latter-day Saints who care for Mother Earth, Papa Tuanuku. We call her Papa Tuanuku. Yeah, that's my question.
Soren, I'll take a stab at that. I'll say that we actually, until just recently, we had an Indigenous board member, Darren Perry. He was the former chairman of the Northern Shoshone Band here in Utah. And we have tried in our symposium the last few years to make sure that we have diverse representation. And so we had, oh, sorry, remind me her name, the Diné professor from New Mexico. She was at our symposium.
Symposium.
Karina King.
Regina King, right.
Karina
King. And we've had a few others that we have tried to either reach out to and they weren't able to participate for some reason. But she really, to give some centrality to that. And so when we've had some of these events, we have tried to acknowledge the Indigenous land and the heritage there, as well as to give a platform for those voices. We are still working on diversifying our board as much as we can, and as well as our membership. So any partnerships there, we are very, very much open to. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I don't know if you heard my discussion, but what we've supported Bears Ears National Monument in particular in the tribal desires to establish that monument and to co-manage that monument. And we've written letters and been to rallies, and in my work, I work with tribes closely as much as I can to support their connection to their cultural landscape here in the Southwestern United States. So I really appreciate you bringing that up. And we are, as Rachel said, trying to be inclusive and respectful of Indigenous people, but we need to do better because it's a sad history of colonization and oppression. And I acknowledge that and want to do better. So if you have other ideas, we are very open to other ways to be more supportive of Indigenous people.
I might just add to Rachel's comment. We've had two board members that have come from Indigenous communities in Utah. James Singer, who was on our board about 6 or 7 years ago, maybe not quite that long ago. He ended up dropping off the board because he ran for Congress, US Congress in Utah's 3rd district. And then Darren Perry, who Rachel referenced, and he recently left our board as well because he's now heavily engaged in the environmental humanities program at the University of Utah. Both have given us really tremendous insights into Indigenous knowledge and have brought renewed passion of our organization around Indigenous issues that speak to thousands of years of stewardship and care for creation in ways that we don't appreciate fully in modern societies all over the world. I know we tend to be centric here in Utah because of the large Latter-day Saint population here, but we're so grateful that you're joining us. I think you're probably the early hours of the morning where you are in New Zealand, but we're grateful to have you join us and remind us of how critical it is to make these connections with these long histories of connection with the earth.
I guess as I've gone through your literature and read your emails, I have gone through the scriptures, and I wish that the gospel would focus more on planet Earth and the environment. And the scriptures that we have are wonderful, and right, I thought it was quite nice that our presiding bishop gave that talk, and I thought that was quite a watershed moment, really. I am reminded of when the Lord had completed his work in the book of Genesis, and he said everything was good, but he said there's one thing missing. There's no man to till the earth. And my people have been tilling the earth since the beginning of time, and we've kept that commandment to till the earth. And Heavenly Father didn't say, you know what, we need more lawyers, we need more accountants, we need more professors. He didn't say that. He said, I'm a gardener, I love gardening, and we need someone to till the earth. And for those of us who have been through the house of the Lord takes us back to the garden. And we know that the earth will return to its paradisical glory. That the plowshares, the spears will be turned into pruning hooks, and the swords will be turned into pruning hooks, and spears will be turned into plowshares. That we're going back, and I feel that the Indigenous peoples have been connected to the taiao, what we call the taiao, from the beginning of time, and we never lost that connection. And we believe that, along with the gospel, we believe that we can worship our Father in heaven and Jesus Christ through their creation, and that we can connect with them on a higher level, not only through the Holy Spirit and through the gospel of Jesus Christ, but through their creation. We believe that in our culture that there are 12 heavens, and our sky is the first heaven, and that our supreme being in my culture lives in the 12th heaven, and that all those heavens are connected, that there's a purpose, a reason, and God has taken us back to basics when we go to the house of the Lord, strips us right down. And we know that when Christ returns, he's going to burn everything and then renew everything, for there'll be a new heaven and a new earth. Take us back to basics. So I think that I believe that the Indigenous peoples do have solutions, ways of thinking, perspective, worldviews. Kōrero tāwhito, which is a Māori word for ancient teachings, and would like to see more of that, and am very uplifted to know that this group here is trying to integrate more Indigenous voices. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Piripi. And Mark, thank you for sharing several links to some of our Indigenous voices that we've heard from over the years from MESA. Perhaps, Piripi, we might invite you to come and share your voice with us at some future fireside. I think it would be really amazing. I don't know if any of you have been to the temple in the last week. I had occasion to go yesterday, and there have been some changes that were announced in the church news this week about some changes in some of the presentation of the endowment ceremony and initiatory. I heard in the endowment at least 3 references that I can recall specifically to what you're talking about, tilling the earth and caring for the earth, that I don't remember having heard so directly or specifically in the past. And I thought that was really remarkable. And so it's definitely a message that we need to carry, all of us. But those like you that bring that knowledge and history of human history for thousands of years, I think carry that message particularly well. So thank you for bringing that perspective and sharing it with us this evening. Well, we're a few minutes after 8 o'clock here locally, or whatever the hour is where you are. I want to again just thank our 3 speakers, Ty Markham, Marc Coles-Ritchie, and Rachael Lauritzen, past and present leaders of the Mormon Environmental Stewardship Alliance, for your great words, for reflecting on some great memories, and really inspirational work to carry the banner for the Mormon environmental stewardship and speak for the earth and give it a voice in the Latter-day Saint community. We know we need that, and we're grateful to see others that are starting to carry that banner as well. I think thanks to our movement, one of the things we didn't mention is that the church's own webpage, the Environmental Stewardship and Conservation in the Gospel Topics Library on the church website, and the church newsroom site both came about shortly into the beginning of this movement. And we like to think that we were influencers in helping to shape some of the content. Back in 2018, there was a really remarkable Earth Day declaration made by the church. In honoring creation, we honor the Creator. And so that will be top of mind for me as we approach another Earth Day in a couple of months. And it's great to see the church is beginning to make this movement also front and center in many ways. With that, thank you for joining us this evening or this morning, wherever you are in the world. We're grateful to see a global audience participating. And we encourage you to be engaged and involved wherever you may be, and to let us know about things that are happening where you are. We'd love to have you join us if you haven't in the past for some of our events that are happening in the Utah and the Western States region. But if you're doing things elsewhere in the world, please share your ideas and your experiences with us. We'd love to highlight them on our social media, in our newsletters, and other ways we have to help spread the message and raise our voices so that we can truly be the salt of the earth and the candle coming out from under a bushel to give this light around stewardship and environmental care to the world.